वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए, पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए, मन अभिमान नाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। सकल लोक मां सहुने वंदे, निंदा न करे केनी रे। वाच काच मन निश्चल राखे, धन धन जननी तेनी रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। समदृष्टि ने तृष्णा त्यागी, पर स्त्री जेने मात रे। जीवा थकी असत्य न बोले, पर धन नव झाले हाथ रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। मोह माया व्यापे नहीं जेने, दृढ़ वैराग्य जिना मन मारे। राम नाम शू ताली लागी, सकल तीरथ तेना तन मारे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। वर्णलोभीने कपट रहित छे, काम क्रोध निवार्या रे। भणे नर सयो तेनु दर्शन करता, कुल एको तिर तार्या रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए, पर दुखे उपकार करे तोए, मन अभिमान ना आने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कहिए जे, पीर पराए जाने रे। पीर पराए जाने रे। पीर पराए जाने रे।
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Before I proceed further, on behalf of India International Center and Sarvodaya International Trust, I would like to thank Srimati Neha Vats Khankriyal for the very moving invocation that she has kindly rendered, one of the Gandhiji's favorite bhajan, Vaishnava janato. Srimati Khankriyal has set the mood and tone for the today's full day conference on the great pertinence of Gandhi in the 75th year of independence, which has been jointly organized by India International Center and Sarvodaya International Trust. On behalf of IIC, may I extend a very warm welcome to Justice Venkatachaliah, former Chief Justice of India and Chairman of Sarvodaya International Trust, who has kindly agreed to deliver the inaugural address today. I also extend a very warm welcome to former President of India, Vice President of India, Shri Hamid Ansari, Shri N. Vohra, President India International Center, Professor Raj Mohan Gandhi, Professor Gita, Dharampal, Lord Bhitu Parekh, Shri Shyam Saran, Life Trustee of IIC, and last but not the least, Ambassador P.A. Nazrat and Shri Arun Maira. At the outset, I would like to thank Ambassador Nazrat for his unceasing zeal and untiring effort to conceptualize and put together this very important and timely conference that the Center is organizing today in collaboration with the Sarvodaya International Trust. As India celebrates its 75th year of independence, this is a time for reflection on where we stand as a nation today and to focus on and reiterate Gandhi's importance and relevance in the contemporary context. The conference is going to be moderated by Shri Arun Maira, who has kindly agreed to our request and agreed to moderate it. I would like to briefly introduce Shri Arun Maira, though he doesn't need introduction. He is an unusual combination of experience as a hands-on leader in the business, public and social sectors, as well as a consultant to leaders. He is a thought teacher on subjects of leadership and system transformation. He has written several books on institutional transformation and the future of India, including A Billion Fireflies, Critical of Conversations to Shape a New Post-Pandemic World, Discarded Democrats, 5 Steps to Consensus, Transforming Why the World Needs a New Ethical Toolkit, Listening for Well-Being, Conversation with People Not Like Us, etc. He has produced far-sighted scenarios for the future of India with citizens' participation in 2000, 2007, and 2013. The insights from those scenarios are becoming very relevant today. As a member of India's Planning Commission between 2009 to 2014, prior to which he was chairman of Boston Consulting Group, and previously he had worked with Tata Group in India and abroad for 5 years. I would now like to hand over the floor to Sri Arun Maira and also request him to introduce the distinguished speakers. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Now the floor is handed over to Mr. Maira.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Shrivastava. Friends around the world, our seminar today is to reflect about the great pertinence of Gandhiji to India in the 75th year of India's independence. Gandhiji was a lesson for the world. He had a vision of a country of free citizens, free from foreign rule, and more than that, a country in which every citizen, rich or poor, Hindu or Muslim, upper caste or lower caste, had economic and social freedom too. He was convinced that freedom must be obtained not by violence, but by becoming better people. He showed the world how millions of oppressed people can win their freedom from mighty rulers without violence. His vision of a country freed from foreign rulers by a non-violent movement was achieved on 15th August 1947, 75 years ago. However, he was not at the center to celebrate it. He was busy working on his wider vision of a country of free citizens, which remains unfinished business 75 years later. Gandhiji did not want his statue on Rajpath, where war memorials stand, or his statue anywhere, because war was not his way of winning freedom. His statue was placed later in front of India's parliament, which represented the right way for India's people to give freedom to each other and to all. India and the world are going through very troubling times. Warmongers are afoot. Economic inequalities are alarming. Divisions by religion and caste are searing society. We have some remarkable speakers in this seminar, all of whom have researched and written about the pertinence of Gandhiji's ideas for India and for the whole world, and achieved great eminence in their lives. Justice M.N. Venkatachaliah, the 25th Chief Justice of India, will inaugurate the seminar. This seminar has been curated by Ambassador Alan Nazareth, an eminent Gandhian scholar who will himself speak to us later in the seminar. The India International Center has organized the seminar. Mr. N.N. Vohra, President of IIC, will deliver the valedictory address. Messages of encouragement and support for this webinar have been received from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Nobel laureate Maria Maguire, Princess Irene, President of World in Harmony, Mr. Vladimir Tolstoy, the director of Leo Tolstoy Homestead Museum, Mr. Kamlesh Sharma, former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Dr. A.T. Ariyaratne, founder of the Sri Lanka Sarvodaya Shramadhan movement, Mrs. Ela Gandhi, founder and director of the Gandhi Development Trust in Durban, South Africa, and Srimati Tara Gandhi Bhattacharjee, chairman of the National Gandhi Museum in New Delhi. Because of acute time constraints, these messages are not being read out, but they are being posted on this webinar's live stream and YouTube video recording, which will be run in a loop between our two sessions. The first session of the seminar is until 1:15 p.m. and the second from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. And at the end of the second session, after the valedictory address, we will have a beautiful rendition of Raghupati Raghav, one of Gandhiji's favorite hymns, which you would like to listen to. I'm now going to invite Justice Venkatachaliah to deliver his inaugural address, but let me, in this case, definitely say a person who needs no introduction, but I must highlight just a few of his achievements. Justice Venkatachaliah graduated with the BSc degree from Mysore University, then secured his BL degree from Bangalore University and began his legal practice in 1951. Since then, he has risen steadily in legal eminence and up the judicial ladder. He's really one of India's leading luminary stars and shall remain so. He was appointed judge of the High Court of Karnataka in November 1975 and elevated as judge of the Supreme Court of India in October 1987. In February 1993, he was appointed its Chief Justice and became the 25th Chief Justice of India. 2 years after his retirement from this post, he was appointed chairman of the National Human Rights Commission for a 3-year term from 96 to 98, and in 2000 as chairman of the National Commission to review the working of the Constitution. He is currently Chancellor of the Shri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, which is a deemed university. He is one of the founder trustees of the Sarvodaya International Trust and its first and present chairman. Justice Venkatachaliah was awarded the Padma Vibhushan in 2004. And now it's my honor to invite you, sir, to deliver your inaugural address.
My respectful greetings to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Maira, for your kind words. Socrates has been compared to a mountain peak that dazzles in the last rays of the setting sun. Though lost in the mist of time, will yet remain in the minds and hearts of men as long as right is might and life is stronger than death. Gandhi will ever be such a dazzling mountain peak of righteousness. His scholarly grandson, Raj Mohan Gandhi, expressed this thought excellently. He said, strange yet wise, hard with many, but hardest with himself, yet instinctively drawn to truth and love. His life was a fuel of lighting up of human suffering, obstinate at times and hazardously sure of himself. Gandhi was, through the 20th century, a spark of consensus across the world. Louis Fisher, we have too many men of science, too few men of God. We have grasped the mystery of the atom and rejected the Sermon on the Mount. Gandhi rejected the atom and grasped the Sermon on the Mount. He was a nuclear infant and an ethical giant. He knew nothing about killing and much about living in the 20th century, unquote. In the first half of the 20th century, which was the most bloody-drenched century in history, Gandhi non-violently plucked the brightest jewel in the British crown and secured for India the independence it had struggled for almost a century. In the 75 years of its independence, it has, despite the acute communal hatred and economic devastation its partition gestated, it painstakingly created a democratic polity based on universal adult franchise and equal rights for all its citizens, irrespective of gender, creed, or caste, enshrined in a carefully crafted constitutional document. During this period, its central and state governments painstakingly built up its political, economic, and social infrastructure and transformed India from one of the world's poorest, most backward countries of the world into one of its top 10, democratically governed, industrial and technologically advanced one. It was the first country that built up its economy, not merely with the muscle power of the factory, but with its brain power. Sadly, as India prepares to celebrate the 75th anniversary of its independence, its political, economic, and social scenario gestate more concern than satisfaction. Despite very impressive and indeed spectacular progress in recent years in digitization of governmental activity, banking, education, elections, and engineering, and in generation of non-conventional, particularly solar energy, the overall situation is somber as religious bigotry, unemployment, and social justice are causing some concern. Besides, the Gandhian ideals and strategies which had secured India its independence and nurtured its national unity and progress have been steadily replaced by those of his ideological antipodes. Gandhi's fundamental contribution in the field of religion was to give primacy to truth rather than to traditional practices. In fact, he made truth the basis of all morality by affirming, I reject any religious doctrine that does not appeal to reason and is in conflict with morality. Though a deeply devout Hindu, his religion was that which transcends Hinduism, which changes one's very nature, binds one indissolubly to truth within, and ever purifies. It is the permanent element in human nature which leaves the soul restless until it has found itself, unquote. Gandhi has also affirmed, independent India as conceived by me will have all Indians belonging to different religions living in perfect harmony. In 1931, he had written in Young India, it has been said that Swaraj will be the rule of the majority community, that is the Hindus. If this would be true, I, for one, would refuse to call it Swaraj and would fight it with all the strength at my command. For me, Hind Swaraj is the rule of all the people and the rule of justice. On January 23, 1948, just a week before his assassination, he declared, It would spell the ruin of both the Hindu religion and the majority community if the latter, in the intoxication of power, entertains the belief that it can crush the minority community and establish a purely Hindu Rashtra. Unquote. Gandhi's enlightened views about religious freedom are well embodied in the Indian Constitution. It's India's constitution making was a sublime event. The debates reached spiritual heights. The aspirations of a large mass of humanity with diversities of every kind had to be captured through compromise and consensus. Ideas of equality and fraternity were not merely legal concepts, but as Acharya Kripalani had said, were moral and spiritual and mystic principles. It is pertinent to recall here the stirring words of the Reverend Swami Vivekananda at the World Parliament of Religions at Chicago in September 1893. He said, "I am proud to belong to a nation which has sheltered the persecuted of all religions and nations of the earth. The present convention, which is one of the most august assemblies ever held, is in fact a declaration to the world of the doctrine preached in the Gita. Whosoever comes to me through whatsoever forum, I reach him. All men struggling through various paths, which in the end lead to me. Sectarianism, bigotry, and its horrible descendant, fanaticism, have long possessed this beautiful earth. They have filled the earth with violence, drenched it with often with human blood, and destroyed civilizations. I fervently hope that the bell that tolled this morning at this convention may be the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with the sword or with the pen, and of all uncharitable feelings between persons bending their way to the same goal." Unquote. They were stirring words. Gandhi was the first victim of religious bigotry in post-independence India. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, a subsequent one. Other 20th century VIP victims of religious bigotry were Prime Minister Solomon Bandaranaike in Sri Lanka, President Anwar Sadat of Egypt, and Prime Minister Ishaq Rabin of Israel. Religious bigotry is therefore the vilest demon to harbor in any country, particularly in a country as vast and diverse as India. Gandhi had stated, "Real Swaraj will come not by the acquisition of authority by a few, but by the acquisition of capacity by all to resist authority when it is abused." The renowned Gandhian scholar Dinesh Sharp has written, "Gandhi was an experimenter in the development of war without violence. His work here was pioneering and not always adequate, but it represents a major development of historic significance, both in ethics and in politics. Many problems in the further development and application of this approach, of course, remain, but in words and action, Gandhi pointed towards what may be the key to resolution of the dilemma of how one can behave peacefully, at the same time actively and effectively oppose oppression and injustice. Recent 402 days of non-violent resistance of thousands of farmers to three agrarian reform laws enacted in October 2020, which they contended would put them in the mercy of the corporates, which finally resulted in the revocation of these laws in November 2021, is proof of this. But this is despite some serious concerns expressed that some hostile groups attempted to infiltrate into the situation and exploit the situation for achieving anti-national ulterior motives. Writing about freedom and equality in the 20th century of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Nobel laureate Professor René Samuel Kazan concluded his essay in these words: "The world whose progress towards unity is increasingly determined by technology is to remain a humane world. Humankind must ensure the realization of Article 1 of the Universal Declaration, and as Mahatma Gandhi wisely counseled, treat his fellow human beings as brothers and sisters, unquote. Asked why we needed a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Professor Kassan, he, in a great understatement, said, we need it because men are not always good. Men are not always good. Gandhi had affirmed, peace will come where truth is pursued and truth implies justice. And as each of us must be the change we wish to see in this world. In the enlightened progressive societies, it is the civil society that shapes and guides the political society. Here in India, it is the political society that dominates and manipulates sections of civil society, setting up one against another on every possible lines of cleavage. In an enlightened democracy, it is the duty of the government to educate the people in the values and duties of good citizenship. We are a plural society. Plural societies are the products of irreversible moments of history. We cannot wish them away. They are here to stay. There are time-tested civilizational standards of successful management of plural societies. Even applying those standards may not guarantee success in the fullest measure, but not applying them will guarantee failure. The broad philosophy is not merely live and let live, but live and help live. In its past 400 years, Europe had hundreds of armed conflicts amongst its states and its political units. The European Union and the common market brought about a near revolution in interstate relations, particularly in preventing armed conflicts. Helmut Kohl had played an important role in bringing this about. Gandhi demonstrated the same visionary approach at the time of India's partition. He appealed to Jinnah that the two newly independent India and Pakistan live as brothers and have a common defense and foreign relations. That could have been the foundation of an ideal South Asian Union, virtually a Gandhian Commonwealth. Soon after he assumed leadership of India's freedom struggle, Gandhi called on its women to join and declared, as long as women do not come into public life and purify it, we are unlikely to attain Swaraj. Even if we did, I would not favor that Swaraj in which women have not made their full contribution. They responded to his call, initially as volunteers in the Congress session, later as participants in the anti-foreign cloth and salt satyagraha. The latter at the Darsana salt works was led by Sarojini Naidu, and Gandhi and other Congress leaders were arrested soon after 19...
Gita, porridge.
Can you hear?
Yeah, somebody's mic is on. Carry on, sir. Carry on. Someone else is.
Am
We
I
can hear you.
audible?
We can hear you. We can hear you. Please carry on.
When Gandhi and other Congress leaders were arrested soon after the 1942 Quit India movement was launched, the brave young Arun Asaf unfurled the Indian flag at its venue. Brave young Usha Mehta and three of her women companions set up and operated a secret Congress radio from somewhere in India. Gandhi's non-violent freedom struggle has transformed these and many other patriotic women from just wives and mothers into non-violent warriors. However, many Indians, though admired Gandhi, had their doubts about pure ahimsa prevailing over the naked, ruthless, ambitious power of the British Empire, and how Gandhi's ahimsa could be integrated into the demands of the statecraft and the power structures of the modern state. A deeper insight into the mechanics of violence and its inherent capacity to perpetuate itself would convince all right-thinking people of the futility of violence as a tool to achieve peace. Alan Nazareth, in his Gandhi, the soul force warrior, convincingly argues the theme with beautiful examples. Gandhi revolutionized revolution and spiritualized it. Our tired and morally exhausted world can survive this suicidal arms race and competitive destruction only on Gandhian principles. In conclusion, I offer my grateful thanks to all the renowned scholars who will be speaking at this webinar, to its eminent moderator, to India International Center for hosting it, and all those who are participating in it as listeners. Thank you very much. I'm grateful to you.
Well, thank you, Justice Venkatachaliah, for a very inspiring and a cautionary speech also, that we have a long way to go. And Gandhiji continues to be, as you said, the dazzling mountain peak of righteousness, giving us light. So thank you so much. It's now my honor, my privilege to invite Shri Muhammad Hamid Ansari, who was the 12th chairman of the Rajya Sabha and 12th Vice President of India from 2007 to 2017 to address us. Mr. Ansari is the only Indian Vice President so far who has served during the terms of 3 presidents in the UPA as well as NDA regimes. He is the longest serving chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Mr. Ansari joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1961. In a diplomatic career spanning 38 years, he served as the Indian ambassador to Australia, Afghanistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. He also served as the permanent representative of India to the United Nations between 1993 and 1995. He was appointed Vice Chancellor of the Aligarh Muslim University from 2000 to 2002, and later was chairman of the National Commission for Minorities from 2006 to 2007. Mr. Ansari was born on 1st April 1937 in Kolkata. After graduating from St. Xavier's College, Calcutta, he pursued his Master of Arts and Doctor of Philosophy degree from the Aligarh Muslim University. Mr. Ansari is truly an erudite as well as a very courageous scholar. His great books include Citizen and Society and Dare I Question. Mr. Ansari, it's our privilege to hear from you.
Thank you, Justice Venkatachaliah ji, Shri N.N. Vohra Sahab, Shri Arun Maira, Mr. Shrivastava, Neha ji, and all the distinguished people who are attending today's conference. The subject is Gandhi's great pertinence to India. Perhaps the thesaurus would dwell on the difference between relevance and pertinence. With the former implying a general and the latter suggesting a more specific impact. Thus, while the progress of our freedom movement was part of a wider process, the impact of Gandhi's personality was critical to imparting its shape and direction. The manner of its impact on the Indian mind is worthy of careful study. So, who was Gandhi? Why was he relevant to his contemporaries? How do we evaluate his bequest to our times? Allow me to recall a famous passage. This little man of poor physique had something of steel in him, something rock-like which did not yield to physical powers, however great they might be. And in spite of his unimpressive features, his loincloth and his bare body, he was a royalty and kingliness in him which compelled willing obedience from others. Having found inner peace, he radiated it to the others and marched through life's tortuous ways with firm and undoubting steps. So described by Jawaharlal Nehru was the man who held India and Indians spellbound in his life and does so to this day. A biography cannot be compressed in an essay, and so my effort today would be to focus on the formative period of the Gandhian ideology and methodology and the final outcome, because these left an imprint on the Indian mind and shaped the approach of ordinary Indians. After his studies in the United Kingdom and his sojourn in South Africa, in the course of which some of his techniques of passive resistance were initiated, Gandhi returned to India a mature idealist and political mobilizer. The political establishment in South Africa heaved a sigh of relief. "The saint has left our shores," said Field Marshal Smutt, "I sincerely hope forever." He was in some matters influenced by Gokhale and Tilak. These early years were critical to the shaping of his mind and of the principles and practices of Brahmacharya, Satyagraha, and Ahimsa. He studied other religions, found virtues in all of them, and scrupulously adhered to his self-definition of a Sanatani Hindu. Elsewhere, he described his language as aphoristic. It lacked precision. It is therefore open, as he put it, to different interpretations. He wrote in Young India that, and I quote, "I am not anti-British, but I am anti-untruth, anti-humbug, and anti-injustice. No Indian has cooperated with the British more than I have," end of quote. His political thoughts were first expressed in Hind Swaraj, published in 1908. It asserted self-rule, also a rejection of modernity. The book is fascinating to read, more difficult to implement as a guide to political action since, as Gandhiji himself admitted, politics encircles us today on the coil of a snake. Gandhi's earliest involvement in India was in the Champaran Satyagraha of 1917, where he adopted the approach of civil disobedience movement, resulting in a committee set up by the government and to proposals that were acceptable by agitating cultivators. A second movement was the Kheda Satyagraha in 1917-18 in Kheda in Gujarat, seeking remission of taxes due to crop failure. Here too, a response was forthcoming from the government. Champaran and Khera and the industrial dispute in Ahmedabad were the first instances of Satyagraha in practice in India. Both hammered home the lesson that Satyagraha could be used in virtual any situation of conflict by literate and illiterate. It was a weapon for all seasons, and in Gandhi's hands, directed by his personal ideology, it gave him the edge over conventional politicians with their techniques of petitions, public speeches, and debates, which were more suitable for the educated. Equally critical was the Rowlatt Satyagraha that critically altered Gandhi's standing with the government and showed him as an all-India leader of immense potential. His tactics were having an impact, and so was his general appearance. An intelligence report in May 1920 assessed that association of Gandhi with any movement is a great asset because his name is one to conjure with amongst the ignorant masses. A report by the Governor of Madras to the Viceroy of India in April 1921 said, and I quote him, "It is amazing what an influence this man is gathering. There is no doubt that Gandhi has got a tremendous hold on the public imagination." End of quote. Gandhi's support for the Khilafat movement was for multiple reasons. A demand for the fulfillment of British pledges given to the Muslims, his own sense of moral responsibility, and to secure Hindu-Muslim friendship. He explained it in his own words in May 1920, and I quote him, "If I had not joined the Khilafat movement, I think I would have lost everything. In joining it, I have followed what I especially regard as my dharma. I am trying to show through this movement the real nature of non-violence. I am uniting Hindus and Muslims. The Khilafat movement is a great churning of the sea of India. Why should we be concerned with what it will produce? All that we should consider is whether the movement itself is pure and worthy." End of quote. Gandhi considered his participation in the Amritsar session of the Indian National Congress in 1919 as his real entrance into Congress politics. After the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, he took an active part in the collection of funds for the memorial to that massacre and also for the redrafting of the Congress rules that resulted in a unanimous report, which sought to make the Congress pyramidical in structure, more representative, and more functional between annual sessions. This was a key innovation that allowed regional committees greater freedom to participate in proceedings. Gradualism was the essence of his approach. My quote through insistence on truth, he said, has taught me the beauty of compromise. When in 1921 session of the Indian National Congress, Maulana Hazrat Mohani, who coined the slogan Inqilab Zindabad, proposed a resolution seeking Swaraj or complete independence from all foreign control to be the objective of the Congress, Gandhi demurred. "Let us not go into waters whose depth we do not know," he said, and suggested other priorities. And yet, there was clarity of vision in his perceptions. In a letter to Dr. B.C. Roy in May 1928, he said, and I quote, "I am biding my time and you will find me leading the country in the field of politics when the country is ready. I have no false modesty about me. I am undoubtedly a politician in my own way, and I have a scheme for the country's freedom. But my time is not yet and may never come to me in this life." End of quote. Any study of the intrinsic principles of Gandhi's thinking and of his major political interventions would show the extent to which the two were intertwined. His autobiography records his readings of Ruskin's Unto This Last, and his own remark that this book captured me and made me transform my life. Gandhi's elaborations of some of his practices was unique. He defined passive resistance as a method of securing rights by personal suffering and the reverse of resistance by arms. It required fearlessness. He chose themes for agitation that appealed to the poorest and the simplest. As an Urdu poet summed up his style, लश्करे गांधी को हथियारों की हाजत कुछ नहीं, हाँ मगर बेइंतहा सब्रो कनात चाहिए. I'll translate it. The army of Gandhi does not need any weapon. Yes, it does need limitless patience and contentment. His personality, lifestyle, and simplicity, and the idiom of his communication caught the imagination of the public. His ashram in Ahmedabad added to the transmission of being a Mahatma. It is the fake dress that has broken down all barriers, wrote Abbas Tayyabji, a former Chief Justice of Baroda. Jawaharlal Nehru wrote that the movement absorbed him so wholly that he gave up all other associations and contacts. Through 1921, the tension between the Congress and the government mounted. First, the Ali brothers and then many Congress leaders were arrested on charge of sedition. The Turkish novelist Halide Edip spent the early years of 1935 in India and some of it with Gandhiji, and recorded her impressions in a book called Inside India, first published in 1937. One chapter of the book records his 11 vows and his manifold activities aimed to build the Indian society from the bottom to the top and focused on abolition of untouchability. Also, the regeneration of the village as a unit of the Indian society and achievement of communal unity. Gandhi's major campaigns against the British rule were the non-cooperation movement of 1920s, the civil disobedience movement of 1930s, of which the Salt Satyagraha was the highlight, and the Quit India movement of 1940s. Tagore posed a question to Gandhi on 18th of January 1930, and the question was, how did one coax an aggrieved yet disarmed, heterogeneous and divided population to wage an assault on a powerful empire? What was Gandhi's reply? I am furiously thinking night and day. Then, in the middle of February, the intuition came to him like a flash. The assault should be over salt. Gandhi pictured a march to the sea by his ashramite army with himself at the head. It had another virtue. All could jointly oppose it, Hindus and Muslims, peasants and landless. Also known as the Dandi March, it attracted a great many people, including Jawaharlal Nehru and Sarojini Naidu, resulted in violence by the police and the arrest of about 60,000 people. The non-cooperation movement in 1920-22 was organized to induce the British government in India to grant self-rule or Swaraj. His speech in Madras on 12th of August 1920 spelled out the essence of the doctrine of non-cooperation. It was Gandhi's first organized act of large-scale civil disobedience. It gathered strength by joining forces with the Khilafat movement launched by the Muslims of India against the British breach of promise made to the Ottoman Turkey. For a variety of reasons, it had a limited lifespan, and the violence in the village of Chauri Chaura made Gandhi call it off, much to the disappointment and anger of Nehru. Nevertheless, it marked the transition from a middle class to a mass basis. A spell of imprisonment followed by the Gandhi-Irwin Pact created space for political negotiations. Gandhi attended the second roundtable conference in London, but was imprisoned on return. The Gandhi-Ambedkar talks resolved the question of separate electorate for the Dalits. On the proposed negotiations leading to the Government of India Act 1935, Gandhi's view was that it was an act of the sword, not of goodwill. He had earlier resigned from the primary membership of the Congress and left the decision-making to the Congress leadership that accepted the clarifications given by the Viceroy. In the elections that followed, Congress won overwhelmingly. The Quit India movement of 1942 demanded an end to the British rule in India. It was launched by Gandhi with a speech whose focus was on ahimsa. And he said, the draft resolution of the working committee is based on ahimsa. Ours is not a drive for power, but purely a non-violent fight for India's independence. The Congress is unconcerned as to who will rule when freedom is attained. The power, when it comes, will belong to the people of India, end quote. He called for an orderly British withdrawal from India and described the promised withdrawal after the war as a post-dated check on a crashing bank. This was unacceptable to the British, who imprisoned the entire Congress leadership. It is, of course, another matter that the Quit India movement was opposed by segments of Indian opinion, including the Muslim League, the Hindu Mahasabha, the CPI, and the Indian states, who felt a fight against the Axis powers should be given precedence. The modest dwelling in Wardha, to which Gandhiji often withdrew, had an aberration, a telephone. It was explained to me that this was at the insistence of the British authorities. When political negotiations were resumed after the war and the partition plan was presented, Gandhiji told Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and I quote, "I can only see evil in the plan," unquote. This was expressed candidly in Dr. Rajendra Prasad's introduction to Pyarelal Nair's book, Gandhi Going to Wipe Their Tears. and this passage I shall quote, which was written by Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Gandhiji was uncompromisingly opposed to the partition of India, which he called her vivisection. Based on a wrong theory and bought out by such questionable means, it would do irretrievable harm to both Hindus and Muslims in India and in Pakistan. But he left it to the Congress ministers in the central government who were in charge of running the administration to act according to their judgment. Once they decided in favor of partition, he did not oppose them, although he never concealed his opinion, or he never conceded opinion. His virtual resignation from the decision-making process was also conveyed to the Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, in his letter of April 11, 1947. Gandhiji was not in Delhi on the Independence Day. On the eve of that day, his mood was bleak. He marked the day with a 24-hour fast, refused to record a message for the Hindustan Times, and said he had run dry. He also declined an interview to the BBC and told an emissary, "I forgot English." A life spent in promoting fraternity was confronted once again by conflagration of violence that preceded and followed the vivisection of India. It was to be the last challenge of his life. Gandhiji lived as, I beg your pardon, Gandhiji died as he lived, dedicated to his principles, to his own version of modernity premised on ahimsa. On his last birthday on 2nd of October 1947, his request to visitors was to pray either for the present conflagration to end or that he be taken away. I do not wish another birthday to overtake me in India still in flames. To us, friends, citizens of India, he was above all father of the nation. We should therefore turn to him for guidance. What would that be? There is a tablet at the Rajghat listing 7 social sins. These are simple yet candid and well worth recalling. Number 1, wealth without work. 2, pleasure without conscience. 3, knowledge without character. 4, commerce without morality. 5, science without humanity. 6, religion without sacrifice. And 7, politics without principle. Would this be a pertinent ingredient in a resolve of this day? It would please the spirit of Bapu if it were so. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Shri Ansari, for a very stirring keynote address. You have put Gandhiji's life into its historical and political context so brilliantly in just a few minutes. You've pointed to the formation of Gandhian ideology and its methodology and their impact on the world. You have mentioned that we must revisit again, as Gandhiji wanted us to, the idea about the village being the unit of Indian society. In our rush to join the global economy in the last 30 years in particular, we seem to have forgotten that unit. We have to now revisit and see how strong are these units economically and politically and environmentally sustainable. And you ended with a very stirring reminder of the 7 social sins that Gandhiji had left us to think about, continue to. Amongst them, wealth without work, commerce without morality, science without humanity, and politics without principle. We seem to be suffering these sins so much today. So it's a time for us, all of us, as citizens of the world, to rethink how we will make the world, but within that, India, our responsibility, and within that, our villages, to be harmonious, economically sustainable, and environmentally too. So thank you so much for the stirring keynote address. Now it's my privilege to introduce Mr. Raj Mohan Gandhi, who is one of India's most eminent historians. He's a biographer and a research professor at the Center for South Asian and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Illinois. He was born on 7th August 1935, and his paternal grandfather was none other than, as we all know, Mahatma Gandhi, and his maternal grandfather is Chakravarti Rajagopalachari. That's the lineage. In 2002, Mr. Raj Mohan Gandhi received the Sahitya Akademi Award for Rajaji, a biography of Chakravarti Rajagopalachari, and his biography of his grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi, Mohandas, a true story of a man, his people and an empire, received the biennial award from the Indian History Congress in 2007, and since has been published in several countries. His other works include Ghaffar Khan, Non-Violent Badshah of the Pakhtuns, Revenge and Reconciliation, an Understanding of South Asian History, and Patel, a biography of Vallabhbhai Patel, and another book, 8 Lives, a study of the Hindu-Muslim encounter. Raj Mohan Gandhi has been engaged for half a century in efforts for trust building, reconciliation and democracy, and in battles against corruption and inequalities. He served from 1990 to 92 in the Rajya Sabha, and he led the Indian delegation to the Human Rights Commission in Geneva in 1990. In the Indian Parliament, he was the convener of the all-party joint committee of both houses, addressing the condition of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and he currently serves as a jury member for the Nuremberg International Human Rights Award. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Raj Mohan Gandhi to address us.
Friends, I feel honored to be part of this. The world changes every moment, but some situations get repeated in history. There's a similarity between the India of the 1940s, the years that led up to independence and partition, and today's India. There was then a concerted drive to tell India that Hindus and Muslims cannot live together. Today, 75 years later, the so-called two-nation theory is back with a bang, amplified by powerful new megaphones. Let us recall Gandhi's response to the wave of division and hate India was facing in August of 1947. To restore the morale of East Bengal's Hindus, he wished to spend Independence Day in Noakhali, assigned by this time to Pakistan. On August 6, after 3 days in Kashmir, Gandhi boarded a train in Lahore for Patna on his way to Noakhali. On the train, he wrote a letter for Harijan, recognizing the possibility of being killed. He added, "I shall be alive in the grave, and what is more, speaking from it." On August 9, 1947, he arrived in Kolkata. Sohrawardi, the premier of undivided Bengal, was on his way out. P.C. Ghosh was about to take over as Chief Minister of West Bengal. Many Muslim police officers had been replaced by Hindus. Kolkata's Muslims are terrified, Gandhi was told, and Sohrawardi urged him before proceeding to Noakhali to spend some days in Kolkata to pour a pot of water over the raging fire. He would put off his Noakhali visit, Gandhi replied, provided you and I are prepared to live together under the same roof. Added Gandhi to Sohrawardi, I don't want you to come to a decision immediately. Go back home, consult your daughter. Sohrawardi accepted the offer. Gandhi said he had been warned by some Hindus that Sohrawardi was not to be relied upon. But then Gandhi added, some Muslims imagined him, Gandhi, to be an enemy of Muslims. Said Gandhi, both of us will live under the same roof and have no secrets from each other. We together will see all the visitors. People should have the courage to speak out the truth in the presence of those against whom it has to be said. On August 13, Gandhi left the place where he had been put up. Sohrawardi left his house in the city, and Haidari Manzil, an old abandoned Muslim house in Beliaghata, a run-down Hindu-majority locality, became Gandhi's latest ashram, with Sohrawardi as his latest fellow ashramite. Accusing Gandhi of being pro-Muslim, a band of angry young Hindus asked him to leave Beliaghata. He said to them, if Beliaghata's Hindus invite their Muslim neighbors to return, I will move with Sohrawardi to a Muslim area until Hindus are invited to return there. The young men were silenced. Another angry group was pacified when Sohrawardi admitted responsibility for the Kolkata killings that had taken place a year earlier. The next day, August 14, was different. Freedom was at hand. In their thousands, people embraced one another, journeyed freely through places that had seemed dangerous only 3 days before. Hindus were taken to masjids, Muslims to mandirs. Hindus and Muslims both shouted Jai Hind and Hindu-Muslim Ek Ho. Next morning, India was independent. At 3 a.m., 3 hours after Nehru had made his tryst with destiny speech in Delhi, Gandhi opened his eyes in a Muslim house in one of Kolkata's humble localities. He recited his pre-dawn prayers. He plied his charkha, said he would consume only fruit juice during the day. There was a stream of visitors. West Bengal's new ministers led by Ghosh, the new governor Rajaji, students, communists, and many others, Hindus and Muslims, visited him. Gandhi's advice to the new ministers of West Bengal was, be humble, be forbearing, beware of power, power corrupts. Don't be trapped by its pomp and pageantry. In the afternoon, Gandhi held a prayer meeting on an open ground in Beliaghata. Thousands of Muslims and Hindus attended. In his remarks, Gandhi expressed joy at the turn of events in Kolkata, concern over news of madness coming from Lahore. He also asked Kolkata's residents to treat the Brits and other Europeans who were staying on in India with the same regard as they would expect for themselves. It was wrong, he said, to force the whites to shout Jai Hind. Driven quietly through the city at his request, Gandhi tried to absorb Calcutta's joy and also to probe whether the change was real or an accident. After his ride into the city, he wrote, by whatever name the change in Kolkata may be described, it is quite clear that all the credit that is being given to me from all sides is quite undeserved, nor can it be said to be deserved by Sohrawardi. This sudden upheaval is not the work of 1 or 2 men, We are toys in the hands of God. He makes us dance to his tune. Eid Day fell on August 18. 5 lakh Hindus and Muslims attended Gandhi's prayer meeting held on the grounds of the Mohammedan Sporting Football Club. Someone in Kolkata asked Gandhi for an answer to uncertainty. I will quote Gandhi's answer, but let us mark that at this juncture, Gandhi himself is filled with uncertainty. He does not know whether or when to go to Noakhali or what to do about Punjab. This is what Gandhi wrote in answer to the question. Whenever you are in doubt, or when the self becomes too much with you, recall the face of the poorest and the weakest man whom you may have seen. Ask yourself if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to him. Will he gain anything by it? Will it restore him to a control over his own life and destiny? Will it lead to Swaraj for the hungry and spiritually starving millions? Then you will find your doubts and yourself melting away. Unquote. In these famous but forgotten lines, Gandhi says Swaraj should mean empowering the weak. Before August ended, Gandhi thought his uncertainty had gone. He would go to Noakhali, accompanied by Suravardi, but a hostile demonstration at Hyderabad Manzil changed their plans. At about 10 p.m. on August 31, angry Hindus smashed the windows of the house, also the doors and the ceiling fans. Gandhi and his aides, Abha, Manu, and Bishen, came out to meet the demonstrators. Bricks and a lathi were thrown at Gandhi, at an unidentified Muslim who was present, and at Bishen, who the crowd thought was a Muslim. With Abha and Manu, 2 very brave girls, as Gandhi called them, at his side, Gandhi instructed the Muslims in the house and 2 policemen who were present to remain calm. He asked the crowd to disperse, which they did, though only when a police officer arrived. Going to sleep at 12:30 a.m., Gandhi was up again in 3 hours. He wrote to Vallabhbhai Patel, now India's Home Minister, describing the incident. He told Patel that he was being asked to visit Punjab, said he felt totally lost, and added, referring also to Nehru, I pin my hopes on you too. I pin my hopes on you too. It was not Gandhi alone who was standing up to the madness of 1947. Nehru and Patel stood with him, as did Maulana Azad, and a great many others, known and unknown. After writing to Patel, Gandhi learned of other killings in Kolkata. He went to affected areas. He saw 2 dead bodies of very poor Muslims. In the afternoon of September 1, a telegram arrived from Nehru, suggesting that he should visit Punjab as early as possible. Whereupon Gandhi thought he would do that, giving up Noakhali, even though Patel had written to him, quote, you will not be able to put out the conflagration in Punjab. When visitors brought more news of Kolkata's violence, around 50 had been killed, Gandhi again changed his mind. At about 8 p.m. on the 1st of September, he decided he would go neither to Noakhali nor to Punjab. He would stay put in Hyderabad Manzil and fast until peace returned to Kolkata. To Nehru, he wrote, if the fury in Kolkata does not abate, my going to Punjab will be of no avail. Running to Hyderabad Manzil from Kolkata's historic government house, the mansion designed for imperial viceroys, Governor Rajaji asked Gandhi, can you fast against gundas? Gandhi replied that his fast could touch the hearts of those behind the gundas, without whose sympathy and passive support, the gundas would have no legs to stand on. Announced at 8:15 p.m. on September 1, the fast had an immediate impact. That day, young Sachin Mitra had been martyred in Kolkata while defending Muslims. 2 days later, on the 3rd of September, another young Hindu, Smritish Banerjee, lost his wife while protecting a peace march. But violence died down. Hindus and Muslims marched jointly for peace. Processions of young women and girls of both communities demanded peace. About 500 members of the North Kolkata police force, including a few Brits and Anglo-Indians, went on a 24-hour sympathy fast while remaining on duty. University students bravely gathered weapons from streets and homes and gave them to Gandhi. Ram Manohar Lohia, who was in Kolkata at the time, brought to Gandhi a group of young Hindus who admitted their violence and handed over an arsenal of arms. When members of another gang turned up asking for any penalty and pleaded only you should now end your fast, Gandhi said they should go immediately among the Muslims and assure them full protection. Not forgetting Noakhali, Gandhi wrote a letter to Nazimuddin, the new chief minister of Pakistan's East Bengal province, informing him that he was being asked to visit both parts of Punjab, which had gone utterly mad. Gandhi added, "Tell me all about Noakhali." At 6 p.m. that day, September 4, a deputation of Hindu Mahasabha, Muslim League and Sikh leaders, headed by Suravardi, went to Gandhi's bedside, urged him, urged him to end the fast. When Gandhi asked if they would risk their lives to prevent a recurrence, they withdrew to another room, from where they returned with a pledge that they would. Reminding them that above all there is God our witness, Gandhi agreed to break his fast. Governor Rajaji observed on September 5, quote, "Gandhiji has achieved many things, but in my considered opinion, there has been nothing, not even independence, which is so truly wonderful as the victory over evil in Kolkata." On the morning of September 9, Gandhi arrived in Delhi by train on his way, he thought, to Punjab. Meeting him at Shahdara station, Patel took Gandhi to where he would stay, Birla House. In the car, Patel told him of killings that had started in Delhi. Gandhi went the same morning to a camp near Humayun's tomb, where Mewatis from Alwar and Bharatpur had taken refuge, to another camp at Jamia Millia, where many of Delhi's Muslims were huddled together, and later that day to 3 camps filled with Hindu and Sikh refugees from West Punjab. For a whole day long, he listened to the tale of the suffering in Delhi. At Jamia, Zakir Hussain told Gandhi of his escape on a train a few days earlier. Had a Sikh army captain and a Hindu railway officer not helped, Hussain would have been killed. Gandhi learned also that Saifuddin Kichlu had been forced to flee from his Delhi home to Kashmir, the land of his forebears. In April 1919, Dr. Kichlu and Dr. Satyapal had organized the anti-imperialist protest that was followed by the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Hindu and Sikh refugees from Pakistan told Gandhi that he had not undergone the hardships they did. He had not lost his kith and kin. He had not been compelled to beg at every door. Gandhi's hosts at Birla House said to him the city was in such disarray that even they, belonging to one of India's richest families, had not been able to obtain vegetables and fruits. Talking to P.C. Joshi, the communist leader, Gandhi said, "I do not remember an occasion in my life when I felt as baffled as I do today." But at the end of the day, Gandhi found clarity. He would not go to Punjab, but remain in Delhi until the capital regained its former self. The next morning, a Sikh taxi driver told Brij Krishna, Gandhi's associate and aide in Delhi from the 1920s, quote, "If Gandhiji had waited some more days before coming to Delhi, all the Muslims here would have been eliminated. In the inflamed climate of September 47, when refugees brought ghastly accounts from Pakistan, turning Delhi into a purely Hindu city was not a fantasy. Angry sections would have supported such a bid, and quite a few civil and police officials would have winked at it. 3 days after arriving in Delhi, Gandhi confronted the RSS chief, M.S. Golwalkar, with reports of the hand of the RSS in the violence in Delhi. Golwalkar said, in answer to a question from Gandhi, that the RSS did not stand for the killing of Muslims. Gandhi asked him to say so publicly. Golwalkar said Gandhi could quote him. This Gandhi did in his prayer talk that evening, but he told Golwalkar the statement ought to come from him. 4 days later, at Gandhi's instance, a group of RSS activists met him. One of them asked Gandhi, "Doesn't Hinduism permit killing an evildoer?" Gandhi answered, "Can a sinner claim the right to judge or execute another sinner? Only a properly constituted government is entitled to punish an evildoer." Day after day, Gandhi spoke to the people of Delhi through his prayer meeting talks, which were broadcast by All India Radio and carried by the newspapers. For example, he said, "I've seen the terrible plight of the Hindus and Sikhs of Pakistan. I have lived in Lahore. Do you think I'm not pained? If any Hindu or Sikh from Punjab comes and tells me that his anguish is greater than mine because he has lost his brother or daughter or father, I would say that his brother is my brother, his mother is my mother." I had gone, Gandhi continued, to Jama Masjid today. I met the residents of that area. I also met their women folk. Some of the women wept before me, brought their children to me to indicate their sad plight. Should I narrate to these Muslim victims the plight of the Hindus and Sikhs in West Punjab and in the frontier province? Will that mitigate the sorrow of Punjabi Hindus and Sikhs? In another talk, referring to the kirpan, he said, "I speak freely and frankly because I am a true friend of the Sikhs. A sacred thing has to be used on sacred and lawful occasions. A kirpan is undoubtedly a symbol of strength, which adorns the possessor only if he exercises amazing restraint over himself and uses it against enormous odds." Ram was constantly on Gandhi's lips. On November 11, 1947, Gandhi said, "My Ram is not a man with 2 hands and 2 feet. But if I'm perfectly fit, it is due to Ram's grace." Everyone understood that Gandhi's Ram was a synonym for Krishna, Shiva, Allah, Khuda, Vaheguru, God. That month, November 47, Gandhi spoke candidly to the AICC. "I know what some people are saying," Gandhi said. "The Congress has surrendered its soul to the Muslims. Gandhi, let him rave as he will. He's a washout. Jawaharlal is no better. Sardar Patel, yes, there is something in him. A portion of him is sound Hindu, but he too is after all a congressman." Such talk, continued Gandhi, will not help us. Hinduism cannot be saved by orgies of murder. You represent the vast ocean of Indian humanity. There are many places today where a Muslim cannot live in security. There are miscreants who will kill him or throw him out of a running train for no reason other than that he is a Muslim. Such things should never happen in India. We have to recognize that India does not belong to Hindus alone, nor does Pakistan belong only to Muslims. To the AICC, Gandhi also spoke of reports that the Mewatis, who live not far from Delhi, were being coerced to go to Pakistan. These are very humble Muslims who live not far from Delhi. Said Gandhi, I understand that 1.5 lakh Muslims are about to be pushed into Pakistan. How shameful that we want to force them to trudge 300 miles on foot. Gandhi's intervention put paid to the plan. It was no longer possible for anyone to ask for the expulsion of the Mewatis. And the AICC renewed its commitment to an India for all with equal protection to all. On January 14, one day before starting what would be his final fast, this is what Gandhi said. Delhi is the capital of India. It is this city which was Indraprastha, which was Hastinapur. It is the heart of India. All Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Parsis and Christians and Jews who people this country from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, from Karachi to Dibrugarh, have an equal right to it. Therefore, anyone who seeks to drive out the Muslims is Delhi's enemy number one, and therefore India's enemy number one. Continued Gandhi, when I was young, I never even read the newspapers. I could read English with difficulty. Even my Gujarati was not satisfactory. But I have had the dream ever since that if the Hindus, the Sikhs, Parsis, Christians, and Muslims could live in amity, not only in Rajkot, but in the whole of India, they would all have a very happy life. If that dream could be realized even now, when I'm an old man on the verge of death, my heart will dance. Children will then frolic in joy. Unquote. On January 18, after 6 days of fasting, Gandhi accepted a glass of orange juice from the hand of Maulana Azad, and he dictated this statement. The leaders and people of Delhi have assured me that from now on, Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims will live as brothers, and under no conditions and on no provocation will the residents of Delhi, including the refugees, become enemies of each other. This is not a small thing. We must pledge that once we have turned our face towards God, we shall never turn away. When that happens, India and Pakistan will unitedly be able to serve the world and make the world nobler. I do not wish to live for any other purpose. On January 21, a day after those who had come to Birla House lawns to kill him had failed in the attempt and slipped out, though one of them who had exploded a grenade was caught, this is what Gandhi said the day after that incident. Let me first deal with the bomb incident of yesterday. People have been sending me telegrams, congratulating me and praising me. In fact, I deserve no congratulations. I displayed no bravery. I thought it was part of army practice somewhere. I only came to know later that it was a bomb, and it might have killed me if God had not willed that I should live. You should not have any kind of hate against the person who was responsible for this. He had taken it for granted that I am an enemy of Hinduism. Is it not said in chapter 4 of the Gita that whenever the wicked become too powerful and harm dharma, God sends someone to destroy him? The man who exploded the bomb obviously thinks that he has been sent by God to destroy me. I have not seen him, but I'm told this is what is said when questioned by the police. He was a well-dressed man. But if we do not like a man, does it mean that he is wicked? If someone kills me, taking me for a wicked man, will he not have to answer before God? When he says he was doing the bidding of God, he is only making God an accomplice in a wicked deed. Continued Gandhi, those who are behind him, those whose tool he is, should know that this sort of thing will not save Hinduism. If Hinduism has to be saved, it will be saved through such work as I am doing. My nurse, who literally brought me up, taught me when I was a child to invoke Rama whenever I had any fears. Having passed all the tests, I'm as staunch a Hindu today as intuitively I was at the age of 5 or 6. Do you want to annihilate Hindu Dharma by killing a devout Hindu like me? Some Sikhs came to me and asked me if I suspected that a Sikh was implicated in the deed. I know he was not a Sikh, but what even if he was? What does it matter if he was a Hindu or a Muslim? May God bless him with good sense. Earlier that day, January 21, Gyani Kartar Singh told Gandhi, quote, afflicted men cannot be balanced men. Everyone cannot be a Mahatma Gandhi. Replied Gandhi, quote, Mahatma Gandhi is neither an angel nor a devil. He is a man like you. History has recorded India's amazing story following Gandhi's assassination on January 30. The tide of madness dissipated. A democratic republic was launched. The Constitution was created. Equal protection was pledged and to a fair extent demonstrated. Dear friends, the relevance of Gandhi is not in question. In any case, that is hardly the thing to worry about. When we think of Gandhi in the India of 2022, other pertinent questions pop up, such as, are we ready to revise our plans and priorities when toxic currents hit us? Are all Indians entitled to protection by the police, to justice from the judges, to space in the media, to space on our soil? Or do we believe in hierarchy? Do we even believe in apartheid, though we would never use that word? Are all Indians my people? Beyond the borders, are the Pakistani people and the Chinese people my enemies? Friends, waves come, waves will go. At some point, it may take, who knows, 20 years or more or less. The people of India will do unexpected and brave things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Raj Mohan Gandhi, for a very soul-stirring and, as a good historian would do, a very vivid description of the world that was, the world in which Gandhiji aspired to create a better world for all citizens. We talk about deja vu, that you looking at the present and it reminds you of something in the past. The way you describe the past so vividly, it felt that it is the world of the present, actually. We are still in the same world that Gandhiji was so dismayed about towards the end of his life. A world, using Tagore's words, a world, he wanted a world not broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, but the walls are building up. We are cracking up. A world where every head should be held high, and that is not the world around us. You pointed to Gandhiji's, a central message of Gandhiji, that you cannot separate the means and the ends. So in the struggle for creating a world which was just to everybody, he said that even during the struggle, your enemy must have dignity and self-respect. And the instance you quoted about Gandhi telling people in 75 years ago when the British were still around, that we do not compel the British to shout Jai Hind. Let them have their dignity too. So thank you so much for reminding us of both the challenge that remains, as also the ways in which we must change the situation. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Dr. Gita Dharampal. Professor Dharampal was appointed Dean of Research at the Gandhi Research Foundation, the GRF, in Jalgaon in November 2018. As a retired professor and head of the Department of History, South Asia Institute of the Heidelberg University, she acquired an interdisciplinary academic training in literature, philosophy in Manchester, England, and Leipzig in East Germany, in social anthropology in Cambridge in England, and Indian cultural history from the SOAS, the Society of Asian Studies in London, and the Sorbonne in Paris. Her publications and research focus on topics ranging from pre-modern transcultural interactions between Europe and India, the maritime culture history of the Indian Ocean region in the period 1400 to 1800 AD, medical history, religious ritual transformations during the period 1500 to 2000, and the social, cultural, and political history of the colonial period in general, with a special emphasis on Mahatma Gandhi's movement of political and cultural resurgence. She has held visiting fellowships and professorships at various international institutions, amongst others at the Stanford University in the USA, as well as at Indian universities in Delhi, Kolkata, and Hyderabad. She's, as you can see, eminently qualified in various subjects, and she also has a variety of language competencies, which include English, German, French, Latin, and basic Hindi. At the Gandhi Research Foundation, she intends to strengthen the research wing, not only by pursuing intensive Gandhian studies, but also by continuing the historical work of her father, the late Shri Dharampal, a historian and political philosopher whose publications have led to a radical reappraisal of conventional views of the cultural, scientific, and technological state of Indian society on the eve of the British conquest. Professor Dharampal, it's a pleasure, an honor to hear from you.
Thank you very, very much. I'm really moved to be part of this event. Thank you so much, Shri Arun, Maira, for this incredibly laudatory introduction, which, needless to say, I don't deserve. My sincere gratitude to Ambassador Alan Nazareth and to the Sarvodaya International Trust for inviting me to be one of the speakers on this very exclusive podium hosted by the Indian International Center. I feel truly honored, but also deeply humbled to be sharing this privilege with my most eminent co-speakers. My respectful namaskars to Professor Raj Mohan Gandhi, to Shri Hamid Ansari, Shri Shrivastava, Justice Venkatachaliah, to Lord Bhikkhu Parekh, to Shri Shyam Saran, and to Shri Vohra, and of course to all members of our distinguished audience. Paying our obeisance to Gandhiji in the midst of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav is certainly incumbent upon us. Yet it is not without an undercurrent of tragic irony for our celebration of India's 75 years of independence, paradoxically coincided yesterday with the 74th anniversary of Gandhiji's assassination. As father of the nation, the Mahatma lived for just over 5 months in independent India and was shot at point-blank range by an ardent nationalist. My deep gratitude to Professor Raj Mohan Gandhi for his most moving narrative of the last months that Gandhi spent in independent India. I wanted to quote a brief passage, which is in answer to a correspondent's naive inquiry. And from this text, you can also savor the terseness of Gandhiji's diction. I quote Gandhi verbatim. He's talking to the correspondent. You are gravely mistaken in assuming that as soon as Swaraj comes, prosperity will flood the country. If before assuming that you had used your imagination a bit to see that after 150 years of slavery, we would need at least half that much time to cleanse our body politic of the virus that has infiltrated every cell and pore of our being during our subjection. You would not have found it necessary to ask me. I am sure you will understand what I mean, namely that far greater sacrifices will be needed after the attainment of self-government to establish good government and raise the people than were required for the attainment of freedom by means of satyagraha. End of quote. This was written on the 6th of June, 1947, and has been published in the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, volume 88, page 86. So you can check it there. This text that I've just read for you is certainly a powerful statement. And with it, Gandhi provides us with a lot of food for thought. Now, in 2022, having reached the halfway mark, India at 75 needs to engage in critical self-evaluation, but not necessarily self-flagellation. And above all, India needs to seriously revisit the Mahatma's legacy and to endeavor to understand what he envisaged for independent India to make her viable for all her citizens, especially for the lowest of the low. Now, even if we do not necessarily agree with everything that Gandhiji said or did, it is nonetheless self-evident and has been underscored most eloquently by the previous speakers that Gandhiji's contributions have impacted on every aspect of human endeavor. Myself, speaking as a representative of academia, and in like manner to my father, Shri Dharampal, a Gandhian intellectual whose birth centenary we are celebrating this year, I would like to make the following emphatic statement. The concepts of science, of politics and economics, of philosophy and psychology, the theories of the organization of society and the state, all of these disciplines have to comprehend, or if need be, counter Gandhiji's thought, words and deeds, each in its own sphere, and in as thorough and rigorous a manner as has been done with the thoughts of the great Gautama Buddha, and more recently in the world of academics, for instance, with the works of Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Karl Marx. Indeed, just to cite one instance, Gandhiji's revolutionary manifesto, Hind Swaraj, published in 1909, with its aim to bring about a Swaraj in ideas, an intellectual Swaraj, represents a work of greater significance than Rousseau's Social Contract and Karl Marx's Das Kapital. For unlike these two books, Hind Swaraj did not mark the end of an age, but instead the beginning of a new order for India and the world. Today, more than ever, Hind Swaraj and Gandhiji's indomitable example sound a wake-up call for all of us, summoning us to engage in independence of thought and action, reinforced by integrity and commitment, virtues which are more urgently required than ever before. Gandhiji, a master of thinking out of the box, can certainly appeal to today's youth, inspiring them to chart out new vistas. Gandhiji, who a century ago arose as a vibrant symbol of the awakening of India from colonial servitude, today, at the beginning of the second decade of the 21st century, Gandhi once again embodies for us the Yug Parush of a new India at 75. Infused with this spirit to make Gandhi come alive, let me use the prerogative to cite one very permanent example. The Gandhi Research Foundation, where I am the dean, was founded by Padma Shri Bhavalal Jain, a truly enlightened entrepreneur in 2009. Privileged to be its dean, let me take the liberty today of introducing this very special institution to you, which exemplifies Gandhiji's great pertinence for India at 75. The cherished dream of Bharat Bhau, as our incredible founder is affectionately known, was to make Gandhi's legacy come alive for today's youth and to enable Gandhi's spirit to flourish and enrich future generations, not only in India, but all over the world. To realize this vision, Bharat Bhau established Gandhi Tirth, meaning a Gandhi pilgrimage site, that was inaugurated in March 2012 by the then President of India, Srimati Pratibha Patil. This impressive monument, built in translucent Jodhpur stone, which Ambassador Nazareth visited some years ago, this Gandhi Tirth represents a magnificent modern temple in celebration of Gandhi's heritage. And yet the grandeur of Gandhi Tirth is true to Gandhi's magnanimous spirit, for although, as we all know, Gandhiji was a follower of simplicity, he was by no means a proponent of poverty or smallness. Indeed, he was championing grandeur in simplicity, and above all, in the use of indigenous resources. So actually, when we associate poverty or smallness with Gandhiji, we deny his innate spirit of grandeur. Inspired by a truly Gandhian spirit, Bharat Bhau, through his unstinting efforts, strove all his life to regenerate indigenous resources in our rural economy and to reinvigorate our community solidarity between the rural and the urban. In line with his life's message, I quote, "To leave the world better than you found it," Bharat Bhau's brainchild, the Gandhi Research Foundation, through a whole spectrum of Gandhian initiatives, aims to inspire the minds, influence and empower the lives of individuals and communities, rural and urban, by exemplifying the relevance and pertinence of Gandhi's vision today for India and the world. For more details, please consult our website at www.gandhifoundation.net. And I take this ideal opportunity to extend to each and every one of you a most cordial welcome to visit Gandhi Tirth, a resplendent oasis in the wilds of Khandesh in northwestern Maharashtra. Indeed, in following Gandhi's dictum, be the change you want to see in the world through simple living and high thinking, each and every one of us can make our contribution towards revitalizing India and in the process help to redeem humanity and planet Earth, and thereby pay homage to the Mahatma as India celebrates her 75th anniversary of independence. Thank you very much indeed.
Dr. Dharampal, thank you so much. You broadened our discussion. You mentioned that Gandhiji made a contribution on every aspect of our lives, and you pointed to his impact on concepts. As an academic, you would, and we must remember that the concepts of science, philosophy, psychology, and economics, and on the theory of organization of society and the state. And I think those aspects of Gandhiji's insights and wisdom need to be, I think, revisited, and they could be very useful, because we do need a new theory of economics, and we do need a new theory of the organization of the state and of society. So thank you so much. We are now concluding our morning session. We would be having a very rich session this afternoon, and I do hope that all of us will be together again at that time at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. In between now and then, we will be playing the messages of encouragement and support for this webinar, which have been received from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Nobel Laureate Maria Maguire, Princess Irene, President of World in Harmony, Mr. Vladimir Tolstoy, the Director of the Leo Tolstoy Homestead Museum, Mr. Kamalesh Sharma, the former Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Dr. Hariya Ratane, the founder of the Sri Lanka Sarvodaya Shramadana movement, Mrs. Ela Gandhi, the founder director of the Gandhi Development Trust in Durban, South Africa, and Srimati Tara Gandhi Bhattacharjee, the chairman of the National Gandhi Museum in New Delhi. And as I mentioned, we could not read out these messages because of time constraints, but they are being posted on this webinar's live stream and YouTube video recording, which will be run in a loop now, between now and our next session, which will commence at 4 p.m. And that session has other eminent speakers, and we'll weave in their ideas with the very rich threads of ideas that our speakers so far, including and especially the inaugural address and the keynote address, and then our two brilliant speakers after that. We'll weave them all together in this afternoon. We will end with a lovely rendition of Gandhiji's favorite hymn, Raghupati Raga. And so looking forward to being together again at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you.